Hey, Pitt, its net rating isn't great. I want to discuss that and why these metrics show Pitt as less than some other teams. And Darrelle Revis makes it to the Hall of Fame. Let's talk about all that today on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
You are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to an episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast, your daily podcast covering the Pittsburgh Panthers. And as always, folks, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Folks, let's talk about Pitt basketball. We've talked a lot about this team recently, and rightfully so. This is a really fun team to watch. It's the renaissance of Pitt basketball, if you will. But there's always been this one nagging thing that you look at with Pitt, and it's their net rating, their KenPom rating. Their net rating, they currently sit in the high 50s. They were 52 after their win against Louisville. They've been in the 60s before. Then you even look at their KenPom. They are currently sitting at 60th overall right now. And people ask, well, why is it that way? Let me try and kind of break this down for you of why Pitt's net and KenPom rating aren't that great. First of all, it's something I've mentioned a lot. Pitt has played a lot of close games, and they've won a lot of close games. And then you also look at blowout losses, and this has been something that really has killed Pitt. Just looking back to their loss against Michigan, West Virginia, and even their loss to Florida State. But those blowouts really tank it. That 3-game stretch from West Virginia to VCU is really still weighing Pitt down. But the schedule is probably the biggest factor in all of this. Net just kind of, net weighs a lot of things, and those margins of victory are the lowest amount of kind of weighting it, right? But when you look at Pitt and their schedule is just really, really easy. It is not an easy, a good schedule. Now, listen, they're 5-2 against quad 1 teams. They have 8 quad 1 and quad 2 wins. That's really good for them. And that's going to be a positive for them no matter what. These are really good wins for them. They're 8-1 against the quad 4. The Florida State loss still, it sucks, right? But their strength of schedule, it just has a lot of quad 3, quad 4 games. They have 10 quad 3 games thus far this year, quad 3 and quad 4 games, and there's going to be so many more upcoming this year in the ACC. That bottom third of the ACC really tanks a lot of the value in the net ratings for a lot of these teams that didn't play great non-conference schedules. Pitt really wasn't one of those. Pitt was not a team that played elite non-conference competition, and that really is going to hurt Pitt in terms of their rating here, this net rating. And so when you look at the rest of their schedule, for example, it's a quad 3 against Florida State on Saturday, a quad 4 against Boston College next Tuesday. They go to Virginia Tech next Saturday. That is a quad 1 game. That is one of their 2 quad 1 games on the road. Then they have Georgia Tech at home, quad 4, Syracuse at home, quad 3, Notre Dame on the road, quad 3, Miami on the road, quad 1. So they have 2 quad 1 games left, 3 quad 3 games left, and 2 quad 4 games left. And so really, that's the crux of why their net isn't where it is. It's 2 reasons. Their schedule is soft, for 1, and then for 2, it is their lack of decisive wins. And so when you kind of put it all together with the scoring margin notes, you look at kind of their efficiency is pretty good. I think that's what's actually bumping them up a lot. Um, that is exactly what is going to allow Pitt to kind of continue to climb if they keep winning. If they just get it done, man, in the win column, they'll be okay. They've beaten tournament caliber teams, and you look at what the NCAA is going to look at. The tournament selection committee is going to look at quality wins against other tournament teams as a big indicator of what you can do at this point in the season. Pitt, Northwestern, that'll be a good win. Northwestern continuing to kind of surge up and kind of start to really creep in there. You kind of look at them. You look at another team, for example, like Miami, that's win. The Virginia win is going to be big for them. But they hate losses. Net hates losses that are Q3 and Q4. And so that loss to Florida State is going to tank Pitt all year long. It just is. And so they have a lot more quad 4 games. They still have quad 3 games. It's a pretty easy schedule down the stretch. And it's one of the easiest schedules in the country in terms of that. You look over the next 2 weeks. In fact, they have the easiest schedule in the Power 6. If you include the Big East in there, Pitt has the easiest schedule in terms of net rating for these teams. That's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because Pitt at this point only has to solidify it, and they have to beat those teams. It's a curse, though, because you lose to them and a team that is, just worked themselves off the bubble. You feel like Pitt's a little bit above the bubble now. They're above the last 4 buys. They're comfortably an 8 or a 9 seed now. Well, now all of a sudden, they crash down because they lose to one of these teams. This is exactly why Pitt cannot lose to one of these teams. To me, and it's not great analysis. It's just kind of what they have to do, right? The stage of which they are in the season is not building a resume. It is solidifying a resume. And that's what I want to get across here. This net rating, it doesn't matter as much as long as Pitt just takes care of their business. They'll continue to rise. And by the time, tournament season rolls around, they win all the games they need to win, they'll be firmly within the top 50, and they'll be pretty comfortable, I think, at that point. If they can continue just to win games. This team just needs to do that and beat the teams you can beat. The issue with the ACC is it's not a good conference, right? You probably all saw the graphic that said the Mountain West is now a better conference than the ACC this year by the metrics. The computers don't like the ACC, but on the court, the ACC, while it's a bad conference, it's not a conference where that lower third cannot just come up and punch you one day. Louisville probably can't, but Georgia Tech even can. They did to Miami. You look at Notre Dame, they certainly can. Syracuse certainly can. Boston College, absolutely they can. Boston College has that high-end talent with Quentin Post and the Ashton Langford brothers. So it's really kind of hard for Pitt to fully walk the line here. They can't sleepwalk through their schedule. But this is why the net rating doesn't like Pitt. But if they beat the teams they should, their net rating will continue to go up. That'll become a boon for them. And as long as they beat those teams, those Q3, those Q4 games that I talked about, I think Pitt's going to be able to actually make this tournament rather comfortably at that point. That'll be 15-5. Very easy for them to kind of just walk into the tournament at that point with their wins. And I do want to keep talking a little bit about this Pitt basketball team and kind of where their strengths are and kind of what's going on with the depth of this team. But first, folks, I want to let you know about FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Folks, this year, the only app you need for your Super Bowl party is FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And we're really excited about the new betting partner we have in FanDuel because for Locked On, they're the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown and so much more with their player props. And listen, the FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So best of all, you can get all of those winnings that you might make instantly. It is so good to be with FanDuel. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockdown to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, folks. Let's continue here to talk about this Pitt team, kind of what they're growing into. I was looking over some trends today. And I find it always fascinating to look at kind of these metrics because it really is kind of eye-opening when you are able to look at a lot of your teams just kind of from the back view. You look at a team like Pitt, for example, and they are kind of in a weird ranking. So they're really efficient offensively. And one of the biggest things that, there's a kind of the 4 formula, if you will, of winning in basketball. Pitt's really good on offense of being efficient. And they're really good at kind of just defending the paint, not allowing a lot of points to be scored there. They have a lot good stats in their direction. Free throws is another one, just shooting 77% from the line, 24th in the nation. Such a big change. And then the 3-point percentage, the amount of 3-pointers they take, the amount they make, it's really good. But here's a few kind of breakdowns I wanted to in some trends that I'm using Haslam metrics right now that kind of they mention with Pitt is that they are worse against teams that can really shoot the ball. If you kind of look at the effective offensive field goal percentage against average opponents that have that kind of around a 45%, they only perform above the norm about 20% of the time. So really, when teams know how to shoot well, that's when Pitt can get into trouble. And we've seen that before. We saw that against Wake Forest, where Pitt really got into a fight with them. You kind of also look to me at that Florida State loss as a big indicator of that to me. When they lost that game, what was it? It was the 3-point shot. And Florida State isn't some sharpshooting team, but they can get hot from deep. And they have enough capable guys there. So in that game, when Florida State did shoot to that effective field goal percentage of over 45, that's when Pitt can really get caught kind of napping. So, against kind of the remaining where, they're just average or below average, Pitt does win those games usually. So that is kind of a good sign for Pitt. Pitt beats the teams that they are supposed to generally. Now, this is something when you have an efficient team on offense that they face too, it kind of goes with this. Pitt doesn't have a good enough defense to really slow them down. That is something that becomes very evident when a team is more of a defensive style team. Pitt is able to kind of crack them down and break them down. We've seen that before. Virginia is a clear example of that, where Pitt was kind of able to crack down Virginia a little bit. But when teams can shoot the ball really well and they can turn into a barn burner, that's when Pitt can get into trouble. And Florida State was able to do that in that second half, and they're able to build leads. And these cold spells are also kind of interesting for Pitt because they're a very volatile team that doesn't have a ton of consistency from kind of quarter to quarter. If you take your 4-minute periods and you break it down, Pitt does not have a lot of consistency. And that's very fascinating to me, actually, about that. So Pitt has a lot of cold and dry spells throughout the game, more than the average team, which I find to be kind of indicative by the eye test. But this is why Pitt can get down 10 points to certain teams, but they can come back because they are a team that goes on a lot of runs. So they're very run heavy. And and they get a lot of kill shots in. Kill shot, that 10-0 run or more when they need it. So they can do that. And more importantly, kind of where Pitt can get caught is with long teams that are able to keep a defensive efficiency kind of down. Um, when you have a really good offensive team but a really bad defensive team, Pitt has been able to win those games. Syracuse brings to mind. You look at Miami where they have won those games, but a longer team like a Duke or a Florida State has gotten them and has nipped them in the butt a little bit. And so this is why like Florida State ain't a great matchup, because even on the metrics, Florida State's not a terrible team defensively. And so Florida State kind of has that ability to catch fire from deep. They are the team to me of these kind of lower pool teams that can give Pitt trouble. So that's kind of why I was worried the first time they faced them. It came to fruition when they lost that game. Now, second time around, Florida State's going to have to replicate a lot of the shooting that they did in that game. But there is a formula, and it's already a formula we've seen play out. And Florida State hasn't shot the ball well recently, so they could be due for another breakout game. So it's certainly something to watch. I think that you kind of look at it and you certainly think about it. But you look at Pitt, for example, against Florida State, and kind of where you expect this game to fall. Well, Pitt's going to be favored by about 7. They're expected to win this game about 77-71. So that's what kind of the expected value is here. But look at a Florida State team and kind of what they struggle against. And you kind of look, they're better than they are. They're 8-17, but they're better than 8-17. And I think that's kind of the weird thing. So Florida State does struggle against a few things. One, teams that rebound well offensively. Pitt isn't a great defensive rebounding team, but they do get after the boards offensively and they create second chances. So Pitt is able to kind of create that a lot of the time. That's where Florida State really struggles. Florida State struggles against teams that really push the pace. I think you saw that at the beginning of the second half when Pitt really started to kind of go up tempo and play a different style. I think that's a cool thing about Pitt is that they have different formulas. And then more importantly, teams that shoot from 3. That is where they can struggle too. And so that's where Pitt's going to have to really kind of hit them hard. There's clearly a blueprint for Pitt to win that game. They should win that game. But they can't let Florida them where they are with their length, their size, and get a 3-point shooting contest going from deep. I think that's the biggest thing in that one. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I want to switch over here to Darrelle Revis. Yes, Darrelle Revis is going into the Hall of Fame. Pitt is going to have another Pro Football Hall of Famer. It was just revealed today at the NFL Honors that Revis is officially going in to the Hall of Fame. It's really good to see that. I feel a little older now because that's a guy that I remember watching while at Pitt. But Darrelle Revis is the best cornerback for my money that's ever played at the University of Pittsburgh. So this isn't all that surprising. You obviously remember the electric punt return he had, but just look at what he did throughout his career with the Jets. Revis Island was a phenomenon, man. Like, it was a phenomenon. It truly was kind of special to watch his career just keep growing and just keep getting better. Because this is a guy that, out of Aliquippa was a highly touted guy. He was absolutely a type of guy that, more importantly to me, changed how you played the game. When he was there, you weren't playing to that side of the field. You weren't testing Revis because it wasn't just like he was going to shut down your top receiver. He shut down everybody. It wasn't like he wasn't just going to shut down, top 5 guys. Like, he would shut down Randy Moss. He would shut down Marvin Harrison. He would shut down elite wide receivers, Calvin Johnson. Like, all these guys he went up against, it was a death row the way of Darrelle Revis. He was that special. He had that magnetism, a rare ability. You talk about eliminating kind of that other side of you talk about eliminating one side of the field. Guys, this is a guy that legitimately did that. That's rare. And so he deserves this. And for Pitt, like I look at it, man, and Revis was so good for Pitt, obviously, and was a first round pick, rightfully so. He was awesome. So you loved Darrelle Revis and kind of what he brought to the table. But look at the actual like stats for Pitt at this point. This is extremely impressive what they're building. 10 Pro Football Hall of Famers. They are one of 5 schools that can claim to have 10 Pro Football Hall of Famers. This is the type of company Pitt is in right now. You know, Notre Dame, USC, Michigan, and Ohio State are there. Pitt's now tied for 4th all time. And they're going to have 2 more guys coming eventually with Larry Fitzgerald and Aaron Donald. Pitt is legitimately on that echelon, and they're kind of an outlier. Like you don't expect to see Pitt there. They were a blue blood in the past, but they fell off, but they're still producing this high level talent. An all-time team, you can put together an all-time team for Pitt, and I truly believe this, that you can put it up against most teams. It really is kind of special, and it's for their brand, man. It really is nice to be able to tout those high-end talents. You can associate these elite players with Pitt. It really is kind of awesome to see that. And Revis, man, he's the epitome of that. He is an icon. He is a persona. Revis Island is a persona. That's what it is. He's a larger-than-life character. And Darrelle Revis is legitimately that special of a player coming from Aliquippa. You know, you kind of love it. He's a hometown guy, a special player, no doubt, and he just embodies all of that. He embodies everything about being a Pitt Panther, and he was so good here. You know, 3-year guy, and all the years he was here. Started as a freshman, 11 games, and then you look. First team All Big East, 2 straight years back to back. He was special. This was a guy that didn't win the Jim Thorpe Award, but he was awesome every time you watched him play out there. And so Revis just continuing to impress even now, just kind of as good of a player as he was, and easily the best cornerback to come through the Pitt football program, in my opinion. And there haven't been like a ton of those. This hasn't been a position where Pitt is like super rich with their history, but Revis is the tops of that. And so everyone that comes through and plays corner has a little bit to attain to. They want to reach the icon level of Revis Island. All right, everybody. As always, thank you for listening to the Locked On Pitt podcast. We'll be back tomorrow talking a little football recruiting as well as Florida State. But Pitt got another commit, and I want to talk a little bit about the trends we're starting to see in the 2024 class for Pitt. They already have 4 commits. They usually don't have that many this early, but good for Pitt. We'll talk about that and kind of where it's going from here. Folks, as always, thank you for listening. As always, hail to Pitt.